Hello everybody, we just finished watching the 11th episode of the Bleach 1000-Year Blood War arc of the anime, and because we just finished watching it, hey, I want to talk about it, so hey, that's what I'm going to do. So this episode is episode number 377 overall, so it's 11 episodes past 366. That's really the biggest thing to note there. The episode is titled Everything But the Rain, being that pretty much what matters here. The rain's important, but it's everything around the rain. And this episode covers chapters 528 of the manga to about 535, or 533.5, I should say. So it covers about 4.5 chapters of content, so we're definitely no longer on that stretch of, hey, we're going to be covering 5 chapters every episode, right? Now we're just covering about 3 to 5-ish, right? And this one sort of falls on the higher side of that. So, as we all know what happened last time, what ended up happening was Ichigo, or Oetsunaima, sent Ichigo back home to the Kurosaki Clinic after he could not claim an Asauchi for himself. Right, and we start this episode off with Oetsu and Renji, and Oetsu's just like, hey, Renji, be honest, you knew he would fail, and Oetsu goes into this spiel of, I know the location of every single Asauchi I have ever crafted and created, right? Like, I know every Soul Reaper who's gotten one, and everybody in the Soul Society gets one, even people like Kenpachi, who just find their blade on the ground after one random battle. He pretty much says that they all get Asauchis, and I know where they all come from. And he pretty much says, but here's the thing, he never had one. He needs to figure out the roots of his past to be able to form and bind an Asauchi to himself instead of finding one in his own way like you just did. As this happens, we get the opening, Scar by Tatsuya Kitani. It's there. I don't really know what to say about it, right? But we see Ichigo is back at home, of course, and what he does is he's in front of the Kurosaki Clinic, and he's just like, no, I can't go here. So he starts to run away as we see Ishin, his father, poke his head out of the window to be like, hey, Ichigo, what's going on? As, of course, Ichigo isn't there, right? We see that Ichigo goes to his workplace where his boss, what is her name? Ikumi is, right? And pretty much Ichigo just does a few things there. It's not really very important to the episode, because what ends up happening is Ichigo's dad comes and rings the doorbell. There's nobody there. We see Ishin in his Soul Reaper uniform just because of how it works, right? So that's what sort of happened here. And pretty much Ishin in his Soul Reaper cloak takes Ichigo back to the house, as Ichigo's just like, oh hey, I understand what you wanted to get from me, right? You wanted me to come here to show something off because of course you're wearing your Soul Society uniform that I don't even know about, right? And as this happens, we see that Mikumi finds Ichigo's soul badge that he had accidentally left at her place whenever he left. So after this, Ichigo's just to his father. He's like, hey, you knew what was going on. You know everything that's happened here, right? And Ishin's just like, yeah, Ichigo, Uraharu's told me what's going on in the Soul Society, right? And I know why you were kicked out, and I know you can't fix your Bankai like this. And he's like, to be honest, you don't know anything. As Ichigo's just like, what are you talking about? And Ishin says, you know, when you were younger, you told me to tell you about the past and what happened with your mother whenever I was ready to and whenever you were ready to. Well, it doesn't matter. Now is the time. As Ishin says, hey, you're not a Soul Reaper and you're not a human. To be truthful, your mom was as we cut back to the past, we see an old Karakura town, and we see a bloody Dashin on the ground, and we see Misaki, Ichigo's mom, there, as we hear her say, hello, my name is Misaki Kurosaki. I am a Quincy. Bum, bum, ba-da-da-da. So this is a very big revelation for the entire sort of Bleach community, especially when this came out, being that we all knew something was up with Ichigo, and we knew that he had a relation to Yhwach, and we knew that he had some Quincy in him. But finally getting the definite answer of, hey, Ichigo's mom was a Quincy is something big and just massive for the series. It just, I don't think anybody really saw coming. Well, I'm sure many people did. That's probably totally wrong, that entire sentence I just said. But this is a very big moment for Ichigo and his character, along with learning the backstory and past of our main character's parents, right? Ichigo may not have had a mom his entire life, but it works into a reason why here in the story. It's not just like random things in other shows. So what happens here at this point is we officially start the Everything But the Rain flashback, and in the manga, this is the title given to all of the episodes under this vein of chapter, right? All these flashbacks involving Ishin and Misaki. So we start off, I should say this is where the break in the episode happened, was between this and the next part. But the next thing that happens is we cut to the Squad 10 barracks in the Soul Society as we see Rangiku going around trying to look for her captain as she knocks Ishin out of the tree. And we get a note here that this is Ishin Shiba. Shiba, of course, is one of the old royal families of the Soul Society, right? Other Shibas we know are, of course, Ganju Shiba and, oh man, what's the fireworks lady's name? Ooh, oh man, I don't remember right now. I just had on top of my tongue. Maybe it will come to me later. But the fireworks technician of Soul Society, and of course Ganju, they're Shiba, so of course there seems to be a relationship. And of course Kai and Shiba, who had Rukia backstory, but that's besides the point. So there's obviously a tie-in here with all of that. And we don't really get that explained too much, but it's definitely there, right? We see that Toshiro Hitsugaya is the third seat of Squad 10 at this time, and there's a whole bunch of folk jokes and fun stuff at this point. Not really a whole lot to note on there. At this point, we get a sort of thing where Toshiro is just like, hey, you know that district that we're in charge of? You know how a Soul Reaper died there 2 months ago, right? Well, this month 2 more died there. And Ishinjo goes to look out, and there's a big thing between Toshiro and Rangiku, and they're just like, even if we wanted to go, we would just hold him back. One of those weird anime moments, right? Excuse me there. At this point, we cut over to a group of 3 people, right? They're looking at these, like, brain-looking things, and we see that these people are, of course, Aizen, Gin, and Kaname Tosen, right? These are the 3, pretty much bad guys in the Arrancar arc, right? Of course, we know that Gin wasn't really a big part of that, and that he had his own reasons, of course, for a Squad 10 member, but it's a big thing that, okay, so Aizen, Ichimaru, and Tosen have something to do with this, right? And they pretty much have an idea of, hey, we have finally been successful in creating a hollow that holifies its targets, right? And they also make a note of, hey, we're almost there on finding the visored locations. And at this point, we cut to Misaki herself, as we see there's somebody trying to take care of her, and they're like, all right, Miss Misaki, how is school? How is everything that is going on? And she's just like, oh, it's good. Then there's something about a Quincy technique, and she's like, it's not so good, right? As somebody walks into the room, it's just like, hello, mother. Will you please quit it out? You were being very loud and annoying to everybody. The mother leaves, as we see this is Ryukin, who is, of course, Uryu's dad. Big important thing there, and so we pretty much see that on the mom's way out. Ryukin asks, hey, where's father? And we understand that he hasn't been home in a long time. He's been off training, and of course we know this from Uryu's backstory, all of the stuff going on off there, while Ryukin doesn't quite like I don't even remember his name, but Uryu's grandpa, of apparently Ryukin's dad. right? And there's a whole thing where Misaki and Ryukin are talking together, and Ryukin's like, hey, I'm sorry, she's just trying to take out her loneliness and anger on you. And we see that there's this maid named Katagiri, and if you don't know, it's not revealed in this episode, and I don't know if it's revealed before this or after this, but Katagiri is, who's his face, his mom, Uryu's mom, so of course she's the one who ends up marrying, Ryukin, as we know that, in the end, Ishin and Misaki get together, right? So at this point, we pretty much get, the reasons why, too many new names. Misaki is being kept in the house that Ryukin's family lives in, right? And that is that she is the last pure-blood Quincy and the last Quincy of her namesake of the Kurosakis, right? All the rest of them have died out, right? And she is a pure-blooded Quincy, which is the same thing as Ryukin, and he is the last of his line, or he's the last one, the lowest down in the generation totem pole, right? So the whole idea is that Ryukin's going to marry Misaki to keep the bloodline in sync, right? So that's the whole thing here, and Katagiri the maid is just here the entire time, just like, okay, sounds good. So at this point, we sort of get Ryukin doing a whole bunch of psychological talk, and he's just like, oh, well, would she be happy, and a bunch of stuff like this. Ryukin's really made out to be a really bad person here, as we have seen throughout the rest of the series. He's made out just to be a horrible person overall, right? As we see that, or we cut to Ishin, right, as Ishin's found some Soul Reapers, and he's jumping around doing his thing, and they tell him about this idea of rain, and we sort of see that he's like, all right, well, if it rains, you two are off duty. I will do all the protecting here. As we cut to later again, where Ishin is sitting on the top of this building as it starts to rain, and Ishin's like, hey, this rain has come really quickly. It seems like it's a cover-up for something, so he releases his immense captain spiritual pressure over the entire town, as the two guys below, of apparently Squad 10 barrack members, are just like, oh wow, that's really powerful and really crazy. Ishin's strong. As they get their faces cut in half, as we see this hollow-looking thing come to attack, and it's pretty much an entirely black hollow, and it has a very strong resemblance to Ichigo's Vase Lorde form that Ichigo took during the fight with Ucleora during the Rancor arc. And this hollow looks almost exactly like it. Like, the mask is that same type of design of the long face, and the toothed smile. It's even got the really long hair behind it, of course. And of course, this is really meant to be what Ichigo's form actually took over in the current form of the story, right? And Ishin sort of makes this observation that its hole has been covered, right? So where there once was a hollow hole, of course, in the center of the chest, it's just like organs and intestines and that looking stuff. It's just patched it all up pretty much, right? So there's a small fight between this black-bodied Soul Reaper or Rancor looking thing. That's spoiled a little bit, but we'll get into it later. And this thing is eventually called White, so I'm just going to call it White. So White and Ishin do some fighting, right? Big thing. And Ishin is sort of like, wow, this thing is, it sort of fights like a Soul Reaper. As we cut over to Misaki, who has felt the spiritual pressure of this fight, and she's running out to go see what it is, as Ryukin appears. And Ryukin is just like, hey, Misaki, you need to take better care of yourself. We need to keep this bloodline intact. And he's really made out to be an asshole. It was like, hey, we will go and kill the Hollow after the Soul Reapers have been murdered, right? We're not going to mess with them until they mess with us, pretty much. And Misaki's like, well, I'm not going to stand for that. If I can fight and maybe save somebody, I'm still going to do it no matter what they are, right? So Misaki goes to run around, and Ishin is still fighting White here. And Ishin, or some old, 13 Court Guard Squad members come over and are like, hey, this is Gotei 13 area. This is Kamakura Town, so we know they're out now in Kamakura Town, of course. And Ishin's like, hey, get back, you're not strong enough for this, as there's a massive explosion, right? And we see that Misaki sort of runs over to see what's going on, right? And pretty much we see them, and this is the point where Misaki's like, hey, I'm gonna go and everything. And we see that Katagiri's there for Ryukin, and Ryukin's like, hey, Katagiri, we're gonna go and make sure that she doesn't die out there, right? So at this point, Ishin sort of realizes this explosion that was done was actually a Sero that was followed off by White. And White sort of makes this note, or not White, Ishin sort of makes a note of, it is really like if I am fighting a Soul Reaper here, but that has a Minos Grande power attached to it in a way. And as Ishin sort of like points this out, he uses his Shikai, which is, activation term is burn, and the sword is Ingetsu, right? So Ingetsu, I don't know what this means, but of course it has that Getsu part of like the Getsu ga Tinsho and those moves that of course Ichigo has been using for the entire series, right? So as this happens, we sort of see that Ishin gets sliced in the back by a Zanpakuto, as we see that Aizen, Gin, and Tosin are all there and present while this battle is going on. And Ishin's just like, there has to be a traitor within our midst. There's something going on, right? And we see that Aizen, I don't know if Aizen makes, I don't know who makes this note, but it's pretty much somebody saying like, hey, you thought it was black because it's black all over, but we call it white because of the whiteness within. So I think this is Aizen and his group, but I'm not sure. I don't know the Japanese voices like I knew the English voices, being that I watched Bleach originally and dubbed. So I don't really know here, and I didn't really feel like figuring it out too hard, right? But pretty much I'm pretty sure that Aizen says this, and of course this is where I'm calling this thing white from, because, well, I'm just calling it white. And at this point, with Ingetsu, Ishin cuts off one of this Hollow's arms, as we see that Misaki appears, right? And she uses her bow and arrow to divert a few of the attacks before eventually Aizen's just like, hey, what's this going on? And he's eventually like, you know what, this is a sort of bump in our plan, but I will let it play out, right? I want to see where this goes. As we see that White starts to attack Misaki, and Misaki lets down her bow as White bites her on her shoulder, but she then summons her hollow bow and just shoots the thing point blank in the head. Really cool, just badass panel altogether. It's just really interesting to see sort of what happened here, and it's honestly really cool looking, right? And this is where my first page of notes ends. I took a lot of notes on this episode, like, geez. Right? So pretty much everyone is shocked by this. Of course, Ishin is, and of course, Aizen, Gin, and Kaname are also, and they're just like, oh my gosh, what just happened? What's going on here? As there's another massive explosion as Ishin just sort of hits the ground, right? And pretty much there's this encounter that happens as Misaki comes over to quote from earlier in the episode plays of, hey, what are you? I'm Misaki, I'm a Quincy. And sort of Ishin just laughs, and they're both just like, hey, well, you saved me, no, you saved me, well, I saved you, well, we're even then, right? And Misaki sort of hesitates before telling Ishin that she is a Quincy, just because that, like, how will they react to me? And Ishin's just like, oh, wow, I've never seen one in the flesh before, like, look at that. As we see that Ryukin and Katagiri are also there, and Ryukin's just like, hey, she's fine, it's fine, I mean, whatever, right? We see that Aizen and his group are just like, that was very interesting, and all of that stuff, as he says a note that, hey, that was a hollow made from a dead Soul Reaper, right? And he makes this note of, hey, we had seeds planted in that thing that hollowified a target, and of course, right now, we had a Soul Reaper that was turned into a hollow that then bit a polar opposite of a Quincy, as he's like, I am very interested to see where this turns out. We get the ending, Salahate at this point, but we have the ending, and at this point, we cut to this final sort of 5-second scene of the episode, where we see Uryu and Hashwolf. Of course, Uryu is Uryu Ishida, the Quincy of the main group, and Hashwolf, who is the second in command of the Stern Ritter. Dun 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 dun. So this is a very big episode for Bleach overall. It's a massive episode having to deal with not only backstories, which I will say at this point we are not quite done with. We still got a ways to go on it, like a few good more chapters. Really massive thing, the mystery between Aizen and what he's doing here, and what role he is to play, of course, since he was a whole one of Ichigo, I planned out your entire life, right? It's a very interesting note to go off of, and something that we will see in the next episode. So a note on the next episode, it will be a hour-long special containing both the information from that would be the last 2 episodes of the season. So it's going to be an hour-long special. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it out on time next week, being that it is the day after Christmas, and I will probably not be able to record stuff so well. But yeah, I really sort of can't wait for what's about to happen. And I think next episode's titled The Blade, You and Me. So it's bound to be very interesting, and we will see what's going on next time as we talk about the 12th, I guess technically the 12th episode of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War, even though I think it's 2 episodes in one. Yeah, so that's going to be it. And yeah, I'll talk to you next time. This is Glowplasma231 out.